The bullet that took Penelope reads, "I came through the window of her family's homestead on a night when the stars seemed close enough to touch." And she learned in that single moment that beauty could be stolen faster than a heartbeat. She was 19 years old when it happened, living with her father and younger brother outside Fort Stanton, New Mexico Territory, in the summer of 1878. The violence wasn't meant for her specifically. A dispute over water rights had turned ugly between neighboring ranchers, and bullets didn't care whose flesh they found. Her father had been arguing with a man named Dutch Morrison about access to the creek that ran through both their properties. Dutch had gotten drunk, ridden up to their house after midnight, and started shooting. The first bullet shattered the kitchen window. The second found Penelope. She remembered the searing pain, the warmth of blood on her face, her father's anguished scream, "Doctor!" Matthews did what he could, but the damage was beyond repair. When the bandages finally came off 6 weeks later, the world looked different, smaller, flatter, half gone. Dutch Morrison fled the territory before the law could catch him. Her father became a shadow of himself, consumed by guilt for a fight that cost his daughter her eye. Her younger brother Thomas looked at her with pity that cut deeper than any blade. And Penelope learned to live with the stares, the whispers, the way potential suitors suddenly found reasons to court girls in other towns. The mirror became her enemy. Where there had once been 2 bright blue eyes, there was now 1 good eye and 1 clouded white, the lid drooping slightly, a scar running from her eyebrow to her cheekbone. She took to wearing her light brown hair loose on that side, letting it fall across her face like a curtain. She learned to turn her head just so, to keep the damaged side in shadow. 3 years passed. Her father died of a heart attack, and Thomas married a girl from Roswell and moved away. At 22, Penelope found herself alone on a failing homestead with more debts than crops. She sold most of the land to pay what was owed and kept just the house and a small parcel. She took in sewing and mending to survive, and she told herself that solitude was a choice, not a sentence. It was late September when Colton Shaw rode into Fort Stanton. He came from Texas, driving a small herd of cattle he'd bought cheap and hoped to sell dear. He was 25 years old, tall and lean, with dark hair that touched his collar and eyes the color of creek water in summer. He had a quiet way about him, the kind of man who listened more than he spoke, who noticed things others missed. Penelope first saw him when she went into town for supplies. She was at the general store, buying thread and flour when he walked in. She had her hair carefully arranged, her bad side turned away from the door, but she caught his reflection in the glass case of the counter. He was purchasing tobacco and asking the shopkeeper, Mr. Henderson, about boarding for his horse. "Mrs. Calloway runs a decent stable," Henderson said. "Fair prices, too." "Much obliged," Colton said. His voice was deep, with a soft drawl that suggested long days under an open sky. Penelope gathered her purchases and headed for the door, keeping her face angled away. She had learned the dance of avoidance, the subtle steps that kept her scars hidden. She almost made it outside before a gust of wind caught the door and blew it back against her. She stumbled, her packages scattering across the wooden boardwalk. Thread spools rolled in every direction. "Madam, let me help you." Colton was beside her before she could protest, kneeling to gather the scattered items. "That is not necessary," Penelope said quickly, reaching for the flour sack. She kept her head down, hair falling forward. "It is no trouble at all." He collected the thread spools with careful fingers, placing them in her basket. When he handed it back to her, their eyes met. She saw him register the damaged eye, the scar. His gaze held steady. No flinch, no quick look away, no polite mask sliding over disgust. "You dropped this too." He held out a spool of blue thread that had rolled near the hitching post. Penelope took it, her fingers brushing his. "Thank you." "My pleasure, miss." He touched the brim of his hat. "Name is Colton Shaw." She hesitated, then replied, "Penelope Reid. Pretty name." He said it simply, as if he meant it. She felt heat rise in her cheeks and turned away quickly, clutching her basket. "Good day, Mr. Shaw." She walked to where her horse was tied, very aware that he might be watching. She did not look back. She had learned not to hope. But Colton Shaw was not like other men. He stayed in Fort Stanton longer than he had planned, selling his cattle in small lots to get better prices. He took a room at the boarding house run by Mrs. Calloway and did odd jobs around town to pay for his keep. He fixed fences, helped at the livery stable, and played cards at the saloon just well enough to win occasionally without making enemies. And he found reasons to see Penelope Reid. It started small. He happened to be at the general store when she came for supplies. He offered to carry her packages to her wagon. She declined, but he walked beside her anyway, talking about the weather, about the price of beef, about nothing in particular. The second time, he asked if she knew where he might find someone to repair a torn saddle blanket. "I do mending," Penelope said carefully. "If you bring it by my place, I can fix it. I would appreciate that." He gave her that steady look again, the one that did not waver. He brought the blanket to her homestead the next afternoon. It was a small place, neat but weathered. The garden was well tended and chickens scratched in the yard. Penelope met him at the door, her hair arranged to hide her scarred side as always. "Come in," she said, stepping back. "Let me see what needs doing." The blanket had a long tear along one edge, the kind of damage that came from a sharp branch or a careless moment. Penelope examined it with practiced hands. "This will take about an hour," she said. "You can wait if you like or come back later." "I will wait, if that is all right." She nodded and gestured to a chair by the fireplace. She settled herself by the window where the light was good and began to work. Colton watched her hands move, quick and sure with the needle. The silence stretched between them, but it was not uncomfortable. "You have a nice place here," he said after a while. "It was my father's. He built it 20 years ago. He is not here now. He passed 3 years back." She did not elaborate. The needle flashed in the sunlight, pulling thread through fabric. "I am sorry. It was his heart." She tied off a stitch and started another line. "What brings you to New Mexico territory, Mr. Shaw?" "Looking for a place to settle," he said. "Texas is getting crowded. I wanted land of my own, space to build something." "There is plenty of space here," Penelope said. "And plenty of hardship, too. I do not mind hard work. Most people do not, until they are in the middle of it." She glanced up at him, forgetting for a moment to keep her bad side turned away. When she realized, she quickly looked back down at her sewing. "You are doing that on purpose," Colton said quietly, her hands stilled. "Doing what?" Hiding, turning away, heat flooded her face. "I do not know what you mean." "Yes, you do." His voice was gentle, not accusing. "And you do not need to, not with me." Penelope set down her sewing. Her heart was beating too fast. "Mr. Shaw, I appreciate your kindness, but I know what I look like. I know what people see when they look at me." "Do you?" He leaned forward in his chair. "Because I have been looking at you, Miss Reid, and what I see is a woman who is capable and strong. I see someone who has survived something terrible and kept going. I see the way you keep your home neat, the way your garden grows despite this dry year, the way your hands work with skill and care. I see all of that with both of my eyes." She stared at him. No one had spoken to her like this since before the bullet. No one had looked past the scar to see her. "You do not know me," she whispered. "Then let me get to know you." It was a simple request, but it hit her like a thunderclap. Let him get to know her. Let someone in. Let herself hope. "Why?" The word came out broken. "Because I want to." He said it as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Because when you smile, which is not often enough, it lights up your whole face. Because you have kind eyes, both of them, and I would like to know what thoughts are behind them. Because I rode into this town planning to stay a week, and I have been here a month, and we both know why. Tears pricked at her good eye. She blinked them back. Mr. Shaw, Colton, please, Colton. His name felt strange on her tongue, intimate. I am not looking for pity. Good, because I am not offering any. He stood and crossed to where she sat. He knelt beside her chair so they were at eye level. I am offering interest, genuine interest, if you will allow it. She looked at him, really looked at him. His face was sun-weathered and honest. His eyes held no deception. And something in her chest, something that had been locked tight for 3 years, began to crack open. All right, she said softly. All right. The blanket was finished and forgotten. They talked until the sun went down, about his life in Texas, about her childhood in New Mexico territory, about books they had read and places they wanted to see. When he finally left, promising to return the next day, Penelope sat in her chair and let herself cry. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of being seen. Colton came back the next day and the day after that. He brought her supplies from town, helped repair her chicken coop, and sat with her in the evenings while she sewed. They talked about everything and nothing. He told her about losing his parents to fever when he was 17, about working cattle drives to save money for land. She told him about the night the bullet came through the window, about watching her father waste away with guilt, about the loneliness of the past 3 years. I thought I would never marry, she admitted one evening. They were sitting on her porch, watching the sun paint the desert in shades of gold and red. I thought no man would want a woman who looks like me. Then those men are fools, Colton said. He was sitting close enough that she could feel the warmth of his arm near hers. You are beautiful, Penelope. She turned to him, exposing the scarred side of her face fully. Even like this. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she did not, his fingers gently brushed the scar, tracing its path from eyebrow to cheekbone. Even like this, especially like this scar is part of your story. It shows that you survived. That takes a strength most people will never have. It is ugly. It is honest. His hand cupped her cheek. Everything about you is honest. That is rare and precious. She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. When had she last felt this? When had anyone touched her with tenderness instead of pity? Colton, she whispered. Yes, I am afraid. Of what? Of hoping. Of wanting something and having it taken away. He moved closer, his forehead nearly touching hers. I cannot promise that nothing bad will ever happen. Life does not work that way, but I can promise that I am not going anywhere. I can promise that when I look at you, I see beauty with both of my eyes. And I can promise that if you will let me, I will spend every day proving that to you. She opened her eyes. He was so close, his face filling her vision. That is a big promise. I mean every word. Why me? Why not you? He smiled, and it transformed his face. Penelope Reed, I have traveled from Texas to New Mexico looking for a place to call home. I think I just found it. She kissed him. It was impulsive and terrifying and wonderful. His lips were warm and tasted like coffee and hope. He responded gently at first, then deeper, his hand sliding into her hair. She forgot about her scar, forgot about everything except the feeling of being wanted, being cherished. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. I should probably court you properly, Colton said, his voice rough. Ask permission, bring flowers, do things in the right order. Permission from whom? My father is dead and my brother is in Roswell. Then I am asking you, Penelope Reed, may I court you? She laughed, actually laughed, and it felt like breaking free. Yes, yes, you may. The courtship that followed was unlike anything Penelope had imagined during the long years when she thought herself unlovable. Colton was attentive without being suffocating. He brought her wildflowers from the desert, not because tradition demanded it, but because he thought she would like them. He taught her to play cards and let her win sometimes, though not always. He kissed her at unexpected moments in the middle of conversations, while she was cooking, when she least expected it. And he never, not once, treated her as if she were fragile or broken. Word got around Fort Stanton that Colton Shaw was courting Penelope Reed. Some people were surprised. A few were scandalized, thinking he could do better. Mrs. Calloway, who ran the boarding house, cornered Penelope at the general store one day. "That man's staying with me. He is smitten with you," she said bluntly. "I have seen many things in my years, child, but I have never seen a man look at a woman the way he looks at you, like you hung the moon." Penelope felt warmth spread through her chest. "He is a good man. He is indeed. You hold on to him. I intend to." There were others who were less kind. A woman named Margaret Turner made sure Penelope overheard her at church, saying it was a shame that a handsome man like Colton was wasting himself on damaged goods. Penelope felt the old shame rising, but before she could respond, Colton was at her side. "Mrs. Turner," he said pleasantly, though his eyes were hard, "I would appreciate it if you kept your opinions about my future wife to yourself." The words fell like stones into water. Future wife. Margaret Turner's mouth opened and closed. The women around her went silent. Penelope looked up at Colton. "Future wife." He took her hand right there in front of the entire congregation. "If she will have me, I was planning to ask proper, but yes, future wife." Penelope felt tears threaten again, but these were good tears. "You have not asked yet. You are right." He turned to her, still holding her hand, not caring that everyone was watching. "Penelope Reed, I know we have not known each other long by most people's standards, but I know what I want and I want you. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to build a life with you, have children with you, grow old with you. Will you marry me?" The church was absolutely silent. Penelope was aware of every eye on her, every waiting breath. She thought about the past 3 years of loneliness, of believing she would never have this moment. She thought about Colton's steady gaze that first day in the general store, the way he had never flinched from her scars. She thought about his hands in her hair, his promises, his kindness. "Yes," she said clearly, her voice carrying through the small church. "Yes, I will marry you." The congregation erupted into noise. Some people clapped. Others whispered. Margaret Turner looked like she had swallowed a lemon. Penelope did not care. Colton pulled her close and kissed her right there in front of God and everyone, and it was perfect. They were married 6 weeks later in the same church, in November when the air was cool and crisp. Penelope wore a dress she made herself, cream-colored calico with blue embroidery. She wore her hair pulled back on both sides, not hiding anymore. If people wanted to stare at her scar on her wedding day, let them stare. She was marrying a man who loved her, truly loved her, and that was all that mattered. Thomas came from Roswell with his wife Sarah, surprised but pleased to see his sister so happy. "I worried about you," he admitted as they stood together before the ceremony. "After everything that happened, I worried you would be alone." "So did I," Penelope said honestly, "but Colton changed that. He is a good man. I can see it in how he looks at you." "With both eyes," Penelope said softly and smiled. The wedding was simple but joyful. The pastor spoke about love and commitment and partnership. When it came time for the vows, Colton took both of Penelope's hands in his. "I promise to honor you," he said, his voice steady and sure. "I promise to stand beside you in good times and bad. I promise to see you, all of you, always. I promise to build a life with you that is full of love and laughter. I promise to be yours today and all days." Penelope felt tears slip down her cheeks, but she did not care. "I promise to trust you," she said. "I promise to let you in, even when I am scared. I promise to be your partner in all things. I promise to love you with my whole heart, to build our life together, to stand beside you always. I promise to be yours today and all days." They sealed the promises with a kiss, and Penelope felt like her life was finally beginning. The broken years were behind her. The future stretched ahead, bright and full of possibility. The reception was held at Mrs. Calloway's boarding house. There was food and music and dancing. Colton spun Penelope around the floor, not caring that she stumbled sometimes, her depth perception still imperfect. He just held her closer and kept moving. "Happy," he murmured against her ear. "More than I ever thought possible. Good. I intend to keep you that way." They spent their first night as husband and wife at Penelope's homestead, which was now their homestead. Colton carried her over the threshold, making her laugh. Inside, he set her down carefully and cupped her face in his hands. "Hello, wife. Hello, husband." He kissed her slowly, deeply, with a passion that had been restrained during their courtship. She responded in kind, her hands sliding up his chest, feeling the warmth of him through his shirt. They made their way to the bedroom, shedding clothes between kisses, learning each other's bodies with reverent hands. When they finally lay together under the quilts Penelope had sewn, Colton traced the scar on her face one more time. "Beautiful," he whispered. "So beautiful." And for the first time in 3 years, Penelope believed it. Their life together found its rhythm. Colton worked the land, expanding their property with money he had saved from cattle drives. He bought more chickens, a pair of goats, and eventually a milk cow. Penelope kept the house and garden and continued her sewing, though now it was a choice rather than a necessity. They talked about everything. Colton told her about his dreams of building a larger house someday, of having enough land to support a good herd of cattle. Penelope shared her love of reading and her secret desire to maybe teach children someday, if the opportunity arose. "Why not start now?" Colton asked one evening over dinner. "Fort Stanton could use a school. Most children around here do not get proper education." "I do not know if anyone would send their children to learn from someone like me." "Someone like you? You mean someone smart and capable and kind." He reached across the table and took her hand. "Penelope, you have got to stop letting that scar define you. It is part of you, but it is not all of you. Easy for you to say, maybe, but I am right and you know it." She squeezed his hand. "I will think about it." Winter came, cold and harsh. They spent long evenings by the fire, Colton whittling while Penelope read aloud from books they borrowed from the pastor's small library. They talked about the future, about children, about the life they were building together. "How many children do you want?" Penelope asked one night, looking up from her book. "As many as you will give me," Colton said with a grin. "A whole houseful." "A houseful? You expect me to birth an entire army, maybe just a small regiment." She threw a pillow at him, laughing. He caught it and tossed it back, then pulled her into his lap. "Seriously, though, I want children with you, sons and daughters. I want to teach them to ride and help them with their schoolwork. I want to watch them grow up in a home filled with love. You will be a good father. And you will be an amazing mother." He kissed her temple. "When the time comes." The time came sooner than expected. By spring, Penelope knew she was carrying their first child. She told Colton one morning over breakfast, simply and directly, "I am with child." He froze, coffee cup halfway to his mouth. "You are certain?" "As certain as I can be without seeing a doctor." The cup clattered onto the table and he was around to her side in an instant, kneeling beside her chair. "Penelope, we are going to be parents." "Yes." He pressed his face against her stomach, his arms circling her waist. She felt his shoulders shake and realized he was crying. She ran her fingers through his hair, her own tears falling freely. "Happy tears," she whispered. "The happiest." He looked up at her, his face wet. "You have made me the luckiest man alive." The pregnancy was normal and healthy. Dr. Matthews, the same doctor who had treated Penelope's eye wound, examined her regularly and pronounced everything fine. Penelope's belly grew round, and Colton treated her like she was made of glass, fussing over her constantly. "I am pregnant, not dying," she protested when he insisted on doing all the heavy chores. "I know, but you are carrying our child and I am going to take care of you both." She could not really argue with that. The baby came in December, a month that brought cold winds and clear skies. The labor was long and difficult. Colton stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, telling her she was strong and brave and perfect. When the baby finally arrived, a healthy boy with a strong cry and dark hair like his father, Penelope wept with relief and joy. "A son," Dr. Matthews announced, placing the baby in Penelope's arms. "Congratulations." Colton looked at his son with wonder, touching the tiny fingers, the small nose. "He is perfect. What should we name him?" Penelope asked, exhausted but euphoric. "What about James? After my father, James Shaw, I like it." She looked down at the baby, who was quieting now, his eyes trying to focus. "Hello, James. Welcome to the world." James was a good baby, healthy and alert. Colton was a devoted father, walking the floor with him at night when he cried, singing him songs in his deep voice, marveling at every tiny change. Penelope watched her husband with their son and fell even more deeply in love. "I never knew I could feel like this," Colton admitted one night, cradling James while Penelope nursed. "This kind of love, it is different from what I feel for you, but just as strong." "We made him," Penelope said softly. "Part you, part me. Our own little miracle, he has your nose." "Poor child. Beautiful child," Colton met her eyes. "Beautiful mother, beautiful family." The years passed, marked by seasons and milestones. James grew from baby to toddler to boy. He had Colton's dark hair and Penelope's blue eyes, the good one. He was curious and energetic, always into something, always asking questions. When James was 3, Penelope gave birth to a daughter. They named her Rose, and she had Colton's green eyes and Penelope's light brown hair. She was a calmer baby than James had been, content to watch the world with solemn attention. Colton expanded the house, adding 2 more bedrooms and a larger kitchen. The homestead was prosperous now. The cattle herd had grown, and Colton had a reputation in Fort Stanton as an honest rancher and a skilled horseman. Penelope did eventually start teaching, holding classes for local children 3 days a week in their home. The parents who had once pitied her or looked away now brought their children to learn reading and arithmetic from her. "You were right," she told Colton one evening after her students had left. "About the teaching. It feels good to share what I know. Told you." He was helping James with his letters while Rose played with blocks on the floor. "You are a natural teacher, patient and clear." "Some of the children ask about my eye," Penelope said. She had been worried about this, how to handle the questions from young, curious minds. "What do you tell them?" "The truth, that I was hurt but I survived, that sometimes bad things happen but we keep going." "Good answer." He looked up from James's writing. "What do they say?" "Mostly they just nod and go back to their lessons. Children are more accepting than adults sometimes." "That is because they have not learned to be cruel yet." It was a harsh truth, but an honest one. Penelope was grateful that her own children were growing up seeing her simply as mother, not as damaged or scarred. To James and Rose, her face was just her face, as normal as the sky being blue. When James was 6 and Rose was 3, Penelope discovered she was pregnant again. This time she was less surprised, more prepared. The pregnancy went smoothly, and in the spring of 1887 she gave birth to another boy. They named him Thomas after her brother, and he had a sunny disposition from the start, smiling at everyone and everything. Their house was full now, full of noise and laughter and life. Colton thrived as a father, teaching James to ride and care for the animals, reading stories to Rose before bed, carrying Thomas everywhere in his strong arms. "Sometimes I cannot believe this is my life," Penelope said one evening. They were sitting on the porch after the children were asleep, watching the stars come out. "9 years ago, I was alone and certain I would stay that way." "I cannot imagine you alone now," Colton said. He had his arm around her shoulders, holding her close. "You are the center of everything. The heart of our family." "We are the center," she corrected, "both of us." "Fair enough." He kissed the top of her head. "Though you do more than me." "Nonsense. You work the ranch, you teach James about ranching, you fix everything that breaks. We are partners." "Partners," he agreed. "I like that." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from years of knowing someone deeply. Penelope thought about the night the bullet came through the window, the night that changed everything. It had taken her eye, left her scarred, nearly destroyed her father. For years she had seen it as only tragedy. But if that night had not happened, she might have married someone local, someone who saw her only as she was before. She might never have learned her own strength. She might never have appreciated the rare gift of being truly seen. And she would never have been sitting on this porch in this moment with this man and the children they had made together. "What are you thinking?" Colton asked. "That life is strange," Penelope said. "How the worst moments can lead to the best ones. You mean what happened to your eye?" "Yes. If I had not been hurt, if I had not spent those years alone, I might not have recognized what we have as the gift it is." "I would have loved you anyway," Colton said. "Scar or no scar, damaged eye or two good ones, I would have loved you. Maybe. But I might not have believed you without everything that came before." He considered this. "Perhaps you are right. Everything that happens makes us who we are, and I like who we are." "So do I, Mrs. Shaw, so do I." The children grew. James became a skilled rider, helping his father with the cattle. Rose showed a talent for music, somehow learning to play the piano that Colton bought for her 10th birthday. Thomas was the family clown, always making everyone laugh, always finding mischief. Fort Stanton grew too. More families settled in the area, drawn by the available land and the relative peace. The town got a proper school building, and Penelope taught there 3 days a week, respected by parents and beloved by students. The other 2 days, she taught advanced lessons at home for children who wanted more than basic education. Colton served on the town council, helping make decisions about water rights and property disputes, using his own experience to help others avoid the kind of violence that had cost Penelope her eye. He made sure Dutch Morrison's name was not forgotten, a cautionary tale about what anger and alcohol could lead to. When James turned 16, he asked his father about the man who had shot his mother. They were mending fence together, father and son working in the easy rhythm of people who knew each other well. "What happened to him?" James asked. "The man who hurt Ma." Colton drove a post into the ground, his face thoughtful. "He ran, left the territory. I heard he died in Arizona some years back, shot by someone else he had wronged." "Good." James's voice was hard. "Son, I understand the anger. I felt it too when I first learned what happened to your mother, but she would not want you carrying hate." "How can you not hate him?" "Because hating him does not change what happened. It does not give your mother her eye back. It just poisons you from the inside." Colton straightened, looking at his son directly. "What that man did was terrible, but in a strange way it led to everything we have now. Your mother is stronger because of what she survived. Our family exists because she learned to see her worth even when others could not. James was quiet for a long moment. Ma never acts like a victim. Because she is not one, she is a survivor. There is a difference. I wish it had never happened to her. So do I. But since it did, all we can do is honor her by loving her well and treating her as the remarkable woman she is. James nodded slowly, then went back to work on the fence. Colton watched him and felt pride swell in his chest. His son was growing into a good man. Rose married at 18 to a young rancher named David Palmer, who looked at her like she was the sun and moon combined. Penelope cried at the wedding, but they were happy tears. Her daughter had found love, real love, the kind that would last. She deserves happiness, Colton said, holding Penelope as they watched Rose dance with her new husband. She does. So did I. So do we all. You got your happy ending, Penelope Shaw. She turned to look at him, this man who had ridden into Fort Stanton 25 years ago and changed her life. His dark hair was touched with gray now, and lines crinkled around his eyes, but he was still the most handsome man she had ever seen. We got our happy ending, she corrected, and it is not ended yet. He laughed and pulled her close. No, it is not. Thomas decided to become a lawyer, studying with Judge Harrison in Fort Stanton and eventually traveling to Santa Fe for formal education. Penelope worried about him in the big city, but Colton reminded her that their son was capable and smart. He will do well, Colton assured her. He has your mind and my stubbornness. God help anyone who argues with him then. James took over more of the ranch work as Colton aged. It was a gradual transition, father to son, done with mutual respect and trust. By the time Colton was 50, James was running the day-to-day operations, and Colton spent more time on the porch with Penelope, watching their grandchildren play. Rose had 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. They visited often, filling the house with noise and energy. The oldest granddaughter, named Penelope after her grandmother, asked about the scar when she was 5 years old. "Grandma, what happened to your eye?" Penelope lifted the girl onto her lap. "I was hurt a long time ago, before you were born. Before your mother was born. Did it hurt?" "Very much, but I got better." "It looks different, it does. But different does not mean bad, it just means different." Little Penelope considered this. "I think it is interesting, like you are special." From across the room, Colton met Penelope's eyes and smiled. She smiled back, her heart full. Out of the mouths of babes. The years continued their steady march. Colton and Penelope celebrated their 30th anniversary surrounded by children and grandchildren. The house was full, the table groaning with food and laughter echoing off the walls. Speech. Thomas called and the others took up the chant. "Speech, speech." Colton stood, pulling Penelope up with him. All right, all right." He waited for the noise to die down. 30 years ago, I married the most stubborn, capable, beautiful woman I have ever known." "I resent the stubborn part," Penelope interjected, and everyone laughed. "It is true, though," Colton continued. "You are all those things and more. You are the foundation of this family, the reason all of us are here today. You taught our children to be strong and kind. You built a life for us through sheer determination and love, and you have made every single day of the past 30 years worth living." Penelope felt tears threaten, as they always did when Colton spoke from the heart. "Stop, you will make me cry. Let me finish." He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands. "When I first saw you, I saw a woman trying to hide, but I also saw courage and grace. I saw beauty that went deeper than skin. I saw someone worth knowing, worth loving, worth spending a lifetime with. And I have never, not for one moment, regretted my choice. Even when I am stubborn, especially then. He kissed her forehead, her scarred cheek, her lips. "I love you, Penelope Shaw. I loved you then, I love you now, and I will love you until my last breath." The room erupted in applause and cheers. Penelope buried her face in Colton's shoulder, overwhelmed. "I love you too," she whispered against his shirt. "So much it scares me sometimes. Do not be scared, we have got each other, always, always." They held each other while their family celebrated around them, and Penelope thought that this moment, right here, was everything she had never dared to hope for. She had survived violence, loneliness, and fear. She had learned to see her own worth. And she had found a love that was true and deep and lasting. The scar on her face caught the lamplight, no longer something to hide but simply part of her story. The clouded eye saw nothing, but her good eye saw everything that mattered: her husband's face, her children's smiles, the life they had built together. Beauty, she had learned, was not about perfection. It was about authenticity, about being seen and loved for who you truly were. Colton had taught her that. He had looked at her with both his eyes and seen not damage but strength. Not ugliness but character. Not a broken woman but a complete one. That night, after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet, Penelope and Colton sat on their porch one more time. It was a warm summer night, the stars bright overhead, the sound of crickets filling the air. "You ever wonder what your life would have been like if you had not stopped to help me that day?" Penelope asked. "If you had just ridden on through Fort Stanton?" "Sometimes," Colton admitted. "But not with regret, only with gratitude that I did stop. I almost did not let you in, I almost sent you away. But you did not. No, I took a chance, I let myself hope. Best decision you ever made. Second best." She squeezed his hand. "The best was saying yes when you proposed. In front of the whole church. That was not your finest moment of subtlety. Would you have wanted it any other way?" Penelope laughed. "No, it was perfect because it was honest, just like everything else about us." They sat together in the darkness. Two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life full of love and meaning. The violence that had scarred Penelope was long past. The physical wound healed as much as it ever would. But the emotional wounds had healed completely, replaced by confidence and joy. As the years passed, Colton's health began to decline. He was 62 when he started slowing down, his joints aching, his energy less than it had been. He never complained, but Penelope saw the signs. She made sure he rested more, that he did not overwork himself, that he saw the doctor regularly. "I am fine," he insisted after every checkup. "You are getting older," Penelope replied. "We both are. There is no shame in taking care of yourself. As long as I can still sit on this porch with you, I am happy." And he did, for several more years. They watched their grandchildren grow, saw Thomas establish a successful law practice, saw James turn the ranch into one of the most prosperous in the territory. Rose's children visited often, and the house was never quiet for long. Colton died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 68, with Penelope beside him. She woke one morning to find him still and cold, a slight smile on his face as if he had died dreaming of something pleasant. The grief hit her like a physical blow, stealing her breath, bringing her to her knees. But even through the pain, she was grateful. Grateful for 37 years of marriage. Grateful for the children they had raised and the love they had shared. Grateful that he had gone peacefully, without suffering. At his funeral, Penelope stood before the crowded church and spoke with a steady voice. "Colton Shaw was the best man I ever knew. He taught me what it meant to be truly seen, to be loved without reservation. He gave me a life I never thought possible. He was my partner, my love, my home. And while I will miss him every day for the rest of my life, I will not mourn him as a tragedy. I will celebrate him as a gift." She lived for another 15 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She taught until she was 70, finally retiring when her joints made standing for long periods too difficult. She kept the homestead with James's help, and she sat on the porch where she and Colton had spent so many evenings together. People in Fort Stanton spoke of her with respect, this woman who had overcome tragedy and built a beautiful life. Young women asked her advice about love and marriage. Children learned their letters from the books she donated to the school, and everyone who met her remarked on her grace and her strength. The scar never faded, the clouded eye never cleared, but Penelope no longer saw them as marks of damage. They were reminders of everything she had survived, everything she had overcome. They were part of her story, the story that had led her to Colton Shaw and the life they had built together. She died at 83, peacefully in her sleep like her husband before her. Her children found her in her bed, her face serene, her hand resting on the side where Colton had slept for so many years. On her nightstand was an old photograph, taken on their 20th anniversary, showing a smiling couple with their arms around each other. In the photograph, Penelope's face was turned fully toward the camera, both sides visible, scar and all. And she was smiling, truly smiling, the kind of smile that came from deep happiness. At her funeral, James stood to speak. He was a gray-haired man now, with children and grandchildren of his own. "My mother taught me many things," he said. "She taught me to read and write, to be kind, to work hard. But the most important thing she taught me was that your worth is not determined by what happens to you, but by how you respond to it." She was hurt badly, but she did not let that hurt define her. She chose to live fully, to love deeply, to build a life of meaning. And she did it all with grace and strength. He paused, looking at the casket draped in flowers. "My father used to say that he saw beauty in my mother with both his eyes. We all did. We all do. She was beautiful because she was authentic, because she was brave, because she loved without reservation. And we were all lucky to know her." Penelope was buried next to Colton in the cemetery overlooking Fort Stanton. Their headstones stood side by side, simple markers with their names and dates and a single phrase that James had chosen: "Forever partners in love and life." The desert wind blew across the graves, carrying the scent of sage and juniper. In town, their grandchildren and great-grandchildren continued the legacy they had built. The ranch prospered under James's sons. Rose's daughters taught school and raised families. Thomas's children practiced law and served their communities. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, family members would gather on the old porch of the homestead, now carefully preserved, and tell stories about Colton and Penelope Shaw. About how they met, how they loved, how they built something lasting out of tragedy and hope. The story of a woman who had been scarred by violence but not defeated by it. The story of a man who looked past surface damage to see the strength beneath. The story of a love that was built on honesty and respect and genuine seeing. It was a story that inspired, that gave hope, that reminded everyone who heard it that beauty came in many forms. That being seen, truly seen, was one of the greatest gifts one person could give another. That love, real love, looked deeper than skin and found worth in character and courage and heart. Young Penelope, Rose's granddaughter now grown with children of her own, told the story to her daughter one evening. They were sitting on the porch of their own home, watching the sunset paint the New Mexico sky in brilliant colors. "Your great-great-grandmother was a remarkable woman," she said. "She survived something terrible and still chose to live with an open heart." "Because of great-great-grandfather," her daughter said. "Yes, but also because of herself. He helped her see her worth, but she had to choose to believe it." That is the important part. No one can make you whole except yourself, but the right person can help you remember that you already are. The girl thought about this. How do you know when you find the right person? Young Penelope smiled. When they see all of you, every part, good and difficult, and they choose to stay. When they look at your scars and see strength instead of damage. When being with them feels like coming home. Like great-great-grandfather did for great-great-grandmother. Exactly like that. They sat together in the fading light, two women connected across generations by blood and story. In the distance, a coyote called, and the desert answered with its ancient voice. The land that had witnessed so much violence and beauty, so much pain and love, continued its endless cycle. But the story of Colton and Penelope Shaw remained, a testament to the transformative power of being truly seen, of looking past surface imperfections to find the beauty beneath, of saying with actions and words and unwavering presence, "I see you, all of you, and what I see is worthy of love." It was a simple message, but profound, and it echoed through the years, carried on by children and grandchildren, by the families they taught and the communities they served. A reminder that everyone deserves to be seen, to be valued, to be loved for exactly who they are. That a scar is not a flaw but a story. That damage is not the end but a beginning. That the right person will look at you with both their eyes and see not what is missing, but what is there, beauty and strength and incredible, undeniable worth. And in that seeing, in that recognition, in that choice to love fully and honestly, miracles could happen. Broken hearts could heal. Lonely people could find home. And two souls could come together to build something lasting and true. The sun set completely, leaving the desert in darkness punctuated by stars. Somewhere, in the cemetery overlooking Fort Stanton, two headstones stood together, marking the resting place of partners who had found each other against all odds and loved each other until the very end. Their story was complete. Their legacy lived on. And the message they left behind continued to offer hope to anyone who needed it, across the years and generations, a timeless reminder of what love could be when it was based on truth and sight and acceptance. She had been blind in one eye from violence. He had said he saw beauty with both of his. And in that simple exchange, in that choice to look deeper and love truer, they had created something extraordinary. A love story for the ages. A testament to the power of being seen. A legacy that would endure as long as there were people who needed to hear that they were worthy, exactly as they were, scars and all. And so the story ended, not with tragedy but with triumph. Not with loss but with love. Not with questions but with answers, the most important answer of all, that being truly seen by the right person could change everything, and that beauty, real beauty, was always in the eye of the beholder who chose to look with both wisdom and love.